I'm convinced this video is jinxed. So, I'm going to do something I haven't done in a while. Crack open a can of pop and hope that fixes it. I don't have any reason to think it will, but this is my fourth take. I've been fighting with the camera on and off. So, that being said, what we're doing today, what I'm trying to do today, is high and low. So, one of the things you may notice on the power rankings board is that I have a high and low section of the board. Now, I touch on it briefly, but I don't get into it a whole lot. And if you're watching this on your phone, or if you don't watch it on a big screen TV, you may not be able to see it very well at all. It's more for my reference. It's sort of like the weeks, 1 week ago, 2 weeks ago, and all the way to 6 weeks ago. That's more for my reference as well. Now, for people watching on a big TV, you'd be able to see it, probably without much trouble. Unless I'm standing in front of it, which can be aggravating, right? So, I decided today, you know what, I'm going to talk about the high and low and whether teams are closer to their high for the season or closer to their low. And so we're going to go through this alphabetically like I do with most things. And I'll also have an asterisk indicating whether they're closest to that high or low. And also, I will discuss teams that are currently lower than that low or higher than that high, or perhaps right in between. And I'll get into some discussion of where teams actually are today. So, starting off with Anaheim, the highest they've been this year is 7th. The lowest they've been is 30th, and they are closer to 30th than 7th. How does that happen? Well, you start the season fast, and then you just don't have any way of maintaining it. The team hasn't been able to maintain that momentum, and it's been a really, really rough year for them. So, Anaheim, they have been as high as 7th. Arizona, the highest they've been is 5th. The lowest they've been is 25th, and currently they are closer to the 25th spot than the 5th. And again, part of the reason that I set this up was because I thought, I know I'm not showing a bias in favor of or against teams from week to week, but I understand there's people who go, there's a bias against or in favor of. And so the high and low is kind of to track, where everybody is, because it should look kind of crazy like this, because you're going to have high points and low points. And right now for Arizona, there's a lot of debate now about Taylor Hall. Who knew? Now, at the time Taylor Hall was traded to Arizona, I thought he was being overhyped. Turns out, so far, he's been overhyped. But now, I think he's getting too much criticism. I think when you look at the overall numbers, he's not the problem in Arizona. But certainly if the team falls out of the playoffs, they will use the Taylor Hall trade as the lightning rod to say it's on him. Boston, the highest they've been this year is 1st. The lowest I've had them is 12th. I still stand by when I had them at 12th because they weren't winning games. They were losing a lot in overtime. Those aren't wins. Right? That's all it is. Are you winning or are you losing? If you're not winning, you can't be moving up, and you can't maintain your spot on the power rankings when you're losing games. Even if it's overtime shootouts, you're not finding ways to win. And Boston had that trouble. But they are closer to number 1 than they are to number 12 right now. They've been on a pretty good run lately. And they currently sit 1 point behind Washington for first place in the NHL. Washington not playing the best hockey in the league right now. Although, there are some that will look at the power rankings and say, well, Washington's number 1 overall. They should be number 1 in the power rankings, which is not how they work. It's not how power rankings work at all. Buffalo, and I've explained power rankings many times to the point where I'm blue in the face. Buffalo, the highest they've been, and this was early in the season, was 3rd. The lowest they've been is 25th. They're at 25th right now. They're 25th overall, and it's been a stunning drop. Stunning because it doesn't feel like it was as stark as last year's, and it still feels like they're doing better than last year, and yet you look at the overall numbers, and it's not been great. So for Buffalo, that feeling you have as a Sabres fan that, it felt like it started well. It did. It really, really did. Calgary, the highest they've been is 7th. The lowest they've been is also 25th. They are currently closer to 7th than 25th. And, right? What is Calgary? Are Calgary right now a team that's going to win around in the playoffs? I don't know. Are Calgary a team that could still go on a run and finish first? Yes, that division is still pretty wide open. No offense to the Canucks. But while they've had a great run for the last, say, month and a half, it is theoretically possible they could find a struggle along the way here, and Calgary could be the team that grabs that spot. But Vegas and Edmonton also are in that position, and Arizona, if they can turn it around, could be in that position as well, because the Pacific is that wide open. So Calgary, who were number one in the West last year, they're not number one right now, and they don't look like they're going to be. Carolina, they were third at their highest, 17th at their lowest. They currently reside at 10th. So they jumped one spot yesterday based on the win they got over the Canucks. They bumped Colorado down, and that's how they're supposed to work. That you look at a game like that and you go, all right, well, Carolina beat a team that's, in the top row, so they'll get bumped up a bit. Colorado, who've had their struggles lately, I will bump them down a bit. And that's kind of how I decide on it day by day. And right now it has Carolina right in the middle between 3 and 17. So they're not any further from their lowest point than they are from their highest point. So it's right in the middle. Chicago. Chicago's high and low this year. They are getting better. And they are. As evidenced by the fact that 17's their highest. 28's their lowest. And right now they are 17th. Yep. They are at their highest point right now and could absolutely find themselves cracking the top 16 as soon as after their next game. Or one for instance, could be if Dallas or Calgary have some struggles, Chicago could pass them on the board. Absolutely. So we'll see. We'll see where Chicago ends up at the end of the year and whether or not their high ends up being in a top 10. Hasn't been there yet, but it could still happen. Colorado. Colorado's high is number 1. Their lowest, number 11. They're at number 11 right now. So again, this is as low as they've got all year. And so they've had a very good season overall. So for Colorado, they're still second in the division. There's no reason to really panic yet. But there are some underlying issues with Colorado that I think have really affected them in recent weeks. Columbus. Okay, so the highest Columbus has been is 6th. The lowest they've been is 26th. They were 26th a lot. They were 26th, I want to say 4 or 5 times on the countdown. But they're 6th, and they're currently 6th. So they're still in the same spot that they were on Saturday night. Surprise, surprise. Some of these just haven't changed because we're only 3 games yesterday. So with them still being in 6th spot, that's a pretty impressive run that they've been on to. And I'm very overall impressed with what Columbus has been able to do this year. Considering they lost everybody, right? They lost everybody. They're done. That's it. Finished. Forget them. They're done. Nope. Dallas, the highest that they've been this year is 4th. The lowest they've been is 29th. And right now, they're closer to 4th than 29th. I do a little bit of math in my head. But it's barely. So they're middle of the road. I know Dallas fans don't like how low I have Dallas on the countdown regularly, but there is a lack of scoring, and there are some issues with their leaders on this team, and I have tremendous concerns when it comes to Dallas in general. And so the highest I've had them is 4th. That was during that tremendous winning streak that they had going on there, and then after that winning streak, things kind of fell apart for them. And when I say fell apart, I mean they weren't able to maintain that. Not that they've had a terrible record since then. They've been good, but not 4th overall in the NHL good. Detroit. Oh, it's been a rough year for Detroit. The highest they've been is 20th, and they currently reside at 31st. Because, yeah. Detroit, on average, is just, they're at the bottom. Just at the bottom. Edmonton, the highest they've been is 2nd. The lowest they've been is 27th. And they started the season around 27th. I think that was the start of the season. And again, they didn't make any moves to improve off of what they did last year, what they had in their lineup last year. And there wasn't really any signs that this was going to happen. But you know what? They've proven a lot of people, myself included, wrong. And Edmonton right now looks like a playoff team. First place, we'll see. But playoff team, yeah, they look like a playoff team in the Pacific. And so they are closer to second than they are to 27th. And they are much closer to second than they are to 27th. Florida. So for Florida, the highest they've been this year is 9th. The lowest they've been is 22nd. They are closer to 9th than 22nd. They're not 9th, but I do think that Florida, as soon as they lose some games, people go, that's it, Florida's crap. Florida's one of those teams that, and again, much like Arizona as well, that because it's kind of expected they're going to fall out of the playoffs, as soon as they lose 2 or 3 games, people go, that's it, they're done. Sometimes it's just one. We go, that's it. See, they're not that good. They overpaid Bobrovsky. They're done. They're still a pretty good team, and they still have every reason to believe they can make the playoffs. If they win tonight against Toronto, they tie them in points, and I believe they move past them because I believe they have a game in hand. Anyways, I know they have the tiebreaker on Toronto, whatever that is right now, and so it's not that bad. Just like it wasn't that bad for Toronto either, as much as people wanted to make it out to be this big thing, and all the articles were out there, all the clickbait. You know, what are the Leafs going to have to do? Are they going to have to sell? No. The Kings. Yeah, it's been a rough year for the Kings, too. The highest they got is 26th. The lowest they've been is 31st. They're closer to 31st than they are to 26th. Yeah. So rough year for LA. They have not got any higher up than 26th, which is absolutely jaw-dropping that a team hasn't been any higher on the board than 26th. I mean, even Detroit got to 20th. They at least flirted with being top 16 early in the season, and then they fell back down. But the Kings, 26th. And that is the worst high for any team this year, is 26th. And, of course, 31, you can't get any lower than 31 until Seattle comes in, and then some of these teams will end up being 32nd because Seattle likely is going to get a pretty good team. So, Minnesota. The Minnesota Wild have been as high as 15th. They've been as low as 31st. They have. They've been as low as 31st. Their current standing, they're right in between. They're 23rd. So they are right in between their highest and their lowest point. And that's about right. Winning enough games that they're not in the running for last in the league or anything like that, but they're not winning enough to get into a playoff spot or threaten for a playoff spot right now. So for Minnesota, they're right in between. Montreal, their high was 9th. I remember taking some criticism. They were too high up, which is fine because I got criticized the week before that they were too low. And right now they are definitely closer to 25th than they are to 9th. But again, Montreal's one of those teams where I don't think it's as dire as it might appear. And yet, I still don't see them being in the playoffs either. So, for Montreal, they are closer to 25th than to 9th. Nashville. Nashville's high point this year, 4th. Their low point, 23rd. And currently, well, they're above 23rd, but not by much. So, Nashville, it's been a rougher year than any of us had expected. They added Duchesne. They got rid of Subban's contract. They didn't have to retain any of it. And then they gave all that money to Duchesne, and so far, it's been a mixed bag when you look at the overall results. There's still a lot of time left for them to figure it out. They're not that far out of a playoff spot, but it's not a pretty picture right now if you're Nashville, because more was expected from this team than they've provided so far. New Jersey, well, I remember they started the season at 14th. And when I did my preseason rankings and I had them at 14th, there was some comments from New Jersey fans of, hey, we're going to be better than that. And there were plenty of comments from people saying, I don't buy the hype. I still think they're not going to be any good. Their low point this year is 30th, and they are definitely closer to 30th than they are to 14th. They're much closer to 30th than they are to 14th. They're very, very close to 30th. And it's been a miserable year. Miserable year for the New Jersey Devils. Really isn't any way around it. Taylor Hall gets traded. The team's record stays about the same, maybe improves a little bit right when he leaves. And they fire the coach. The GM's out. Everything's become a disaster with New Jersey. It's insane. And last summer, Ray Shero won the offseason. Now he's out of a job. Craziness. The New York Islanders, it's been quite the swing for them. They've been as high as first. They've been as low as 19th. They are closer to 19th right now than they are to number one. And what's interesting with the Islanders is, so if you look at their recent performance, 6 weeks ago they were third. They were third 5 weeks ago. They were 9th 4 weeks ago, and 8th 3 weeks ago, and then 8th 2 weeks ago, and then 17th week after that, as I made a market correction. And 19th is their lowest, and they're 18th right now. So it's been quite the drop for the New York Islanders, and we'll see whether or not they're able to turn it around. Kiefer Bellows gets called up today in part to try to turn that around. The New York Rangers, the highest they've been this year, 16th, which is low, admittedly. The lowest they've been is 24th. So what's interesting here is that their high of 16th is low, but their lowest point of 24th means they've been pretty consistent in terms of where they're at. And right now, they're at 24th. So the Rangers have been pretty consistently ranked throughout the year. Where, yes, they've hit that second row at points, or third row, I should say, in points, and they've been fourth row as well, but pretty remarkably consistent. There's only 8 spots between their highest and their lowest so far this year, which is the smallest difference for any team on the board. Ottawa. No, that's not true. LA, 5. See, I've already got a blind spot for LA. LA, 5. Ottawa. Is Ottawa's 8? Yeah, it's exactly 8. They've been as high as 23rd. They've been as low as 31st. And they're closer to 31st right now than 23rd. So also remarkably consistent are the Ottawa Senators. The highest they got was 23rd, and that was a pretty good week. Remember that week well. We were all younger then. Of course, that's the case even with videos from yesterday. The science fact brought to you by THG. So the highest they've been is 23rd, lowest 31st. There were concerns they were winning too many games at points this year. Those concerns are gone. They're vaporized. At this point, even if Ottawa went on a 7 or 8 game winning streak, I don't think that would put them in any position to threaten to get out of a lottery spot. They're pretty firmly entrenched, and that's where the plan was for them to be. Although they were supposed to be better this year than last year, and we'll see at the end of the year if that does end up being the case, that they are better this year than last year. That was kind of the aim, and then next year they want to be back into the playoff race. So far so good, I guess, for Ottawa. Philadelphia. For Philadelphia, the highest they've been on the power rankings is 5th. The lowest they've been is 25th. And currently, they're closer to 5th than 25th. It's close. It's borderline, but they're closer to 5th than 25th. And for Philadelphia, again, their home record, fantastic. Their road record, not. So this is kind of on the road and at home. So when they have extended home streaks, or home stands, that's the word I'm looking for, stands. Home stands. Extended homestands would lead to them moving their way up the board. So we'll see whether or not they find their way back up the board as we move on through the season. If they can improve that road record, they get there. Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's high, number 1. They're low, 18th. They are closer to 1 than 18th because currently they're number 1. See? Last night's win, yesterday afternoon's win over Washington, left me shaking my head a little bit and going, yeah, they're still best in the league right now. So for power rankings, they've moved back into the number 1 spot. They bumped Tampa Bay down, and the Capitals stayed the same spot. So this is where things kind of stay tricky. That people say, oh, this team lost this week. Why didn't they move down? Because that's not quite how it works. You don't have to move up or down based on every single result. And so Pittsburgh bumps up because they beat the Capitals. And it was a pretty solid game for them. And Matt Murray rounding into form is scary news too, because we're getting within earshot of the playoffs. And if Matt Murray rounds into form just in time for the playoffs, we all need to act like we're surprised this year. I've done Matt Murray videos a couple years in a row. I didn't do one this year because I thought, you know what, he's just going to round back into form anyways. There's no point in me doing a video that already exists on the channel. And he bounced back from that as well. Remember last year at points we were talking about Casey DeSmith might take his job, and how ridiculous does that sound now? We may see that this year as well. Although Jari's numbers have been better than DeSmith's were last year. San Jose. It's been a rough year for San Jose. The highest they've been on the board is 10th. The lowest they've been is 28th. And yeah, they're closer to 28th than they are to 10th. It's not really a debate at this stage. They're definitely closer to 28th than they are to 10th. Now, St. Louis, the Blues, the highest they've been is 1st. The lowest they've been is 16th. And currently, they are still closer to number 1 than they are to number 16. Again, it's a downbeat they're going through right now, but they've never been lower than 16th on the power rankings, and I don't anticipate them falling that far before the end of the year as well. St. Louis is first in their division. They've got a better cushion in their division than anybody else right now, and that could make a team a little bit lazier. That could be an argument you could make about Boston when they were going through their drought, but I don't see any reason to worry about St. Louis. They're going to be fine, and I think come playoff time, that's when we're going to start seeing these guys saying, you know what, we can win back-to-back championships. Let's go for that. And St. Louis may very well be a team that can do that. They have the depth. Depth is what tells you whether or not a team can do it. Tampa. Tampa's high point this year, 1st. Their low point, 17th. Definitely higher to 1st than 17th. They're currently 2nd. And remember when I had them at 17th and I had like 15th and 14th, I kept hearing people saying you should have them lower. And the reason we all thought, well, they should probably be lower is because they weren't meeting expectations. It's not that their record was ever bad. Go look it over. Their record was never really bad, but they weren't meeting expectations. Well, now they are. And it's been an amazing run they've been on for quite a while. And they've eked out some victories here and there, but they're still getting a bunch of wins. They're getting a bunch of wins on the road. And so once they get into a nice long homestand, they could easily pass the Washington Capitals, get that number 1 spot, and then we can all have that discussion again about the President's Trophy and what it means to a team's hopes for a Stanley Cup victory. Toronto Maple Leafs. You can't go wrong with Toronto, because no matter where you put them, somebody's going to be mad. Somebody's going to say, well, that's wrong. And so it's not a surprise to me the highest they've been is 4th and the lowest they've been is 24th. This is a team that there is probably no greater Jekyll and Hyde team than Toronto. That they go out there one night, they look absolutely fantastic. And then the next night they go out, all right, I won't say next night because people are going to say, well, it's back-to-backs, of course. Their next game, which might be 2-3 days later, they look awful. And you look at that and you go, their blue line's terrible. Freddie doesn't look like he's interested in playing tonight. This is a terrible team. They're not going to make the playoffs. And then the next game, they go out there and they look fantastic. And you know, this team can win around this year. This team could be a threat for the Stanley Cup this year. Greatest Jekyll and Hyde team in the league. Absolutely. The Vancouver Canucks, and this is what's making me realize I haven't updated this fully because I didn't change the Canucks number. The Canucks number had been 8 before this week. Now it's number 5, which is where they currently reside on the power rankings. And their lowest this year is 29th. Because November. November makes that happen. November is when the team kind of looks terrible. And things have been pretty darn good lately. Getting 3 points in games in New York against the Islanders and in Carolina against the Hurricanes in back-to-back matinee games, that's impressive. The Canucks look like they're bound and determined to finally make the playoffs after four seasons missing it, and it'd be nice to see a playoff game involving Vancouver. Keep in mind, the entire time this channel's been a channel, I've never seen a Canucks game in the playoffs. That's never been a thing. So every year it's been why the Canucks missed the playoffs when I do the why they missed the playoffs series where I talk about all the teams that missed the playoffs, and the Canucks are just going to be one of those teams every year. Maybe this year they're not. Current power rankings would indicate probably not. But again, I'm not counting any chickens before they've hatched. If this team finishes above 500, that was my goal this year. Was I'd like to see this team finish with more wins than losses, and at the very least, it looks like they should reach that goal. So there is some progress that's been made. It's been really interesting to watch. Vegas, the highest they get, 3rd. The lowest they get is 19th. And currently, actually, wait a minute on that. No. Nope. I went, yeah, they're closer to their high than their low, and then it's like, no, actually they're not. It's close. I could have thrown the asterisk in the middle, but that would have made me a liar, and then I'd owe myself money for defamation. So, yeah, Vegas is closer to 19th and 3rd, but that doesn't mean that they're at 19th, because they're not. If you watch the power rankings, you know they're not at 19th, and they have been as high as 3rd this year. And it's funny because anytime I have Vegas in the top row, people will say Vegas is overrated. And when I drop Vegas out of the top row, you'll see Vegas fans going, hey, we belong in the top row. So that's just the way that works. And it's one of the fun parts of the power rankings. And again, as long as people don't, get personal with it, the comments don't bother me. It's when the things get really personal and sometimes they sound kind of threatening. I'm like, wait, people are taking this way too seriously. And that was never what I wanted when I started this channel up. Was I need people to, personally attack me on the internet. I had work for that. If I wanted to just get personally attacked, I could have just stayed at my other job. Vegas, they're closer to 19th, but it's only just barely. They're pretty close to right in the middle. Capitals. Well, the Capitals' high point was 1. Their low point is 11. They're still closer to 1 than they are to 11. And it's interesting because I think they hit 11 the 3rd week. So I did the preseason rankings where I had them at first. I felt going into this season they were the best choices first, and I'm picking them to win the Stanley Cup. I'm still picking them to win the Stanley Cup this year. But there were a lot of, why are they number 1? They lost in the first round. They already had their time in 2018. St. Louis should be number 1 because they won the Stanley Cup. And I had St. Louis, I believe, in 2nd and Boston in 3rd. I believe that was where I had them, and I think Tampa was in 4th. But the Capitals, they fell to 11th pretty quick. And then that was all forgotten not long after that either. And I think of all the teams on the power rankings, they've spent the most time at number 1. At the end of the year, I will look over all of the stats, and we'll get into which team spent the most time at number 1 and how many weeks Detroit was 31st. Because nobody else is going to beat Detroit for that record. They're going to win something this year, and it's going to be a Dundee as the worst team in the NHL. I have a Dundee award that I've been waiting to use. So the Dundee for worst team power rankings, that'll be Detroit. So spoilers. Winnipeg to end this off. The highest they've been all year is 8th. The lowest they've been is 21st, and currently they're below 21st. They're 22nd right now. And I don't know how you fix this with Winnipeg, because it's the same problem we thought they had at the start of the year, which was the defense. And now through injuries and just wear and tear, the defense has become a point of contention for them. And we'll see. We'll see whether or not the Winnipeg Jets can get it all together again. They've shown they can. They showed in the win over St. Louis recently that they can do this. But for Winnipeg, it's been a tricky season for them overall. And again, I think Winnipeg has a good team. I think Winnipeg can get it together, and we'll see whether or not that's the case. They had a rough January. We'll see if it's a better February. So there you go. High and low, all 31 teams. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing right through. You just happened upon this video. This channel had 132,000 subscribers yesterday and 60 million views. So thank you guys so much for that. I may do a video later on that. But for now, we're done. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.